Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. Tonight's episode, Xtreme TV. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight we're covering Twin Peaks Season 2, Episode 5 of that awesome ABC TV show. I have with me Professor Pixel, and we're going to just dive right into this because this was an episode that initially started off, I thought, sort of weak, Pixel, and then I thought it built to a very, very strong finish. But it started off where we have Cooper talking to Diane. And ha ha ha, he thought he was chewing on one of his earplugs because we know Cooper's kind of particular about things, in addition to being somewhat spiritual, as we'll say, not necessarily religious, but obviously in some sort of a Tibetan type of philosophy, that Buddhism, whatever you want to call it, Taoism, I'm not sure which one, whatever. He does yoga in the morning, so he's going to do a little extra because, of course, he'd been shot. But, of course, when he does the headstand, we go back to that one little loose end of Audrey's note was fell under the bed when he had gotten shot. That was at the end of the last episode in the first season, episode 8. And of course, we know she's at One-Eye Jacks, and that just kind of kicks his ass in gear. To me, not much to really say about this. Thoughts?
You forgot something.
That's why you clean up.
The giant was right. It's also worth noting their housekeepers must suck.
Well, I guess that's one way of looking at it if you want to nitpick. Go right on ahead, sir.
Well, we go from there and we go right into the sheriff's office. Hawk is there and basically says that they asked around, and one of the people in the around the summer house where Leland used to stay as a boy, they do not remember a gray-haired man. In fact, I think he said they remembered the opposite, like some old lady used to live there. But he says he had to drink like 2 pots of tea, and that reminds him he needs to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Lucy,
go ahead.
Lucy's also leaving, and a temp's coming, and Lucy's trying to be like, okay, are you sure you don't need me to stay around to tell her what to do? Because she wants to make sure it's all prepared before she goes. But the sheriff, Harry, he's like, no, you go right ahead. You go visit your sister, mother, whatever. But right after that, Dale comes up to Harry and says basically that he knows where Audrey is. That it's information catching up, and we get to learn a little something because I didn't realize Lucy was leaving.
I think we know why she's leaving, because obviously she doesn't know who's supposedly the father of her child. And so that's part of the plot angle that's going on here. And it's also interesting too, because they've never said anything direct, and in television, like I say, this was a big deal back then, but abortion, for lack of a better term, which is what this angle is here, something that, 30 years ago was talked about a lot less, I think, publicly and on TV. Not that it wasn't discussed, but it's kind of weird because I just kind of didn't remember it being that big of an angle. And we start off with Cooper being maybe whimsical or whatever, but then of course the whole thing here with Hawk and drinking the tea. Hawk is, one of those side characters that we haven't really seen too much of, but we see him every now and then, and it's more of a reminder that he's there. Thankfully, he gets a bit more screen time because he seems to be quite representative of what many people think of Indians, indigenous blah, 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 people and all that too. Like, he's got this connection with the town that perhaps Cooper doesn't have, and we know that he knows the log lady well and everything else. But for me, I don't know. I just thought this first opening act, the first third, one of the 3 acts like we typically have in a play, was pretty weak, because the next scene here, you get Bobby and Shelley explaining how to use this harness by this dude, because of course they're trying to keep Leo in there, and it's supposed to be a laugh riot, ha ha, funny thing, and it's not. But then I popped because as soon as I saw the guy and he started talking, I forgot, oh, that's Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley, Lenny and Squiggy, and he passed away, I think, last year in late 2020. Apparently he'd been battling some multiple sclerosis for maybe 40 years, some disease, unfortunately, but someone like me that grew up watching something like that from the 70s saw him in there, and it kind of broke character. But I don't know, I just felt like this third of the act was a little, like I say, kind of goofy, but it wasn't working for me. It was very weak. And I think too, the thing with Lucy is that while she's going to take care of her business, allegedly, she seems to be more bothered, not that she's going to take care of business, but because everyone's kind of cool with her taking off for a couple of days, even though she's the one that sets out the coffee and donuts. So it was interesting to see her in a panic because we haven't seen that before.
Yeah. I don't know what the hell that was, man. I took it as one of those. It's one of those weird Twin Peaks things. This could not happen anywhere else. Because he finally gets it working and he's just being swung left and right. I was laughing. I know you weren't, but
I'm starting to feel bad for Leo now. I mean, it was just silly. You know, it may be funny to some, but for me, I was just kind of like, you know. But he did a good job in the scene, and I think it's probably the only time we're going to see him because he's the insurance salesman. But obviously, we're going to the whole plot thing there with Bobby and Shelley is that Leo's not dead. He's still around. So we're going to go really, really absurd in a way with how we're going to deal with it because Leo's brain dead, which is going to be a big thing in a little bit later in this episode here, actually quite shortly. So Bobby and Shelley, even though they think they've gotten rid of Leo, they really haven't. So it's, hey, they've made a decision to go down this path, and here's the price they're going to have to pay for getting Leo's disability checks. He's brain dead, and so they're going to have to figure out, since he has to go home, how to deal with it. And I imagine this is only going to get even more absurd as the episodes go on.
So, yep, and you know, in typical Twin Peaks fashion, we go from this kind of stupid, goofy scene straight to something serious. Court is in session for Leland on the count of murder. And Leland actually says that he is not guilty of murder in the first degree. And they are pleading for bail. And the defense doesn't want to give it to him. And this is the first time I believe we meet this the DA. And he basically comes up. I wish I could remember his name, but he's this big guy with beard, and I don't know. I for a character we're meeting for the first time, he actually has a presence that I quite like, that I haven't gotten from a new character in these last 4 episodes. But they obviously want to deny him bail. But the sheriff, right after he's done, stands up and he speaks for Leland. And as soon as he sits down, we do I have to mention the deputy dumbass sketching part? Can we just skip over?
Well, I actually kind of popped with that because it reminded me that, hey, he's actually a pretty good sketch artist. And it was just funny that he only drew like the backside of somebody's head. And I thought, well, somebody would still buy that, you know, but it made it a little light. But actually, this district attorney that came in, he's the guy that was in the diner that Hank stole his ID.
Oh, right.
So that's gonna come up. Yeah, so we'll see.
He didn't have the hat.
Right. So yeah, whether he remains to be an important figure or not, we'll find out. It doesn't feel like it, but I agree with you. The guy did his part well, and there's a little Southern thing here too, because the type of the old school tie he's got is a Southern thing, and then of course the judge himself kind of seems like that as well. But Leland.
Speaking of the judge, he after that little bit about him sketching the back of people's heads, a little more face there, Andy. The judge says that he's going to release Leland, but obviously he can't leave town. He has to stay in the area, and they will go ahead and set a court date. And that's pretty much where it ends. But we move on from there. And
boy, now we're starting to pick up the pace. My boy Harold Smith. This is tremendous, sir. Go ahead.
Meals on Wheels with Mr. Smith and Donna. She says that after she brings in the food, that she's got a proposition for him.
I bet she does.
She says that she'll share some of her life with him if he lets her read Laura's journal, because we've known he's had Laura's journal for about 2 episodes now.
Yep.
He quickly counters and says that if she does that he'll read from the journal to her, but he cannot leave the room. So she agrees, and so he goes to his bookshelf. He has like this knob that he turns on the side, lets out the bottom shelf, and he grabs a notebook, shuts it, and he has this whole station that he's prepared to start writing, and he's ready, and she's trying to avoid it. She gives basic information. Oh yeah, I grew up in Twin Peaks. Where did you grow up? And she's definitely throwing eyes at him. And
she's putting a full tilt boogie on him. Absolutely, she's doing everything but raping him.
So she doesn't really give anything, but as she's leaning in, she snatches the journal, and it's like she's trying to play with him, and she makes her way towards the door, and she's trying to pull him outside, trying to lead him outside, and he's like, please just give that to me. Eventually she opens it, goes out to the front yard, and he is trying to reach out and get it. He actually steps outside of his house, and after a moment he starts shaking and he collapses to the ground. I don't know. When this first started, it was a little weird, and it continued being weird. And it's still weird, but I'm far more intrigued right now because their dynamic is very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I agree with you. Harold is obviously a character we've been introduced now for a couple episodes, and being friends with Laura means he knows something. So he has what Donna wants, which is information. And so how is she going to go about getting it? Well, she's going to use her feminine charms. And so there's definitely, Donna does seem to me to be generally interested in him, much in the same way she was with James. But it's like, she seems to almost have like a gypsy curse where she can't get what she wants, sort of. Maybe from trying too hard or not or what, but she's definitely putting the moves on him. And Harold seems like, he's in charge of this seduction because he's not forcing himself on her, if you will. Actually, she's come to the door. It's at his pace. So actually, it's almost kind of like the roles of seduction here are a little bit backwards too, because normally it's at the woman's pace or whatever. But then Donna actually puts on the charm, and we'll see that in this episode here too. But you can just tell even by the way she's dressed, and the way she's looking at him now, it's definitely going on. And they don't rush it, they don't force it, they don't start humping like rabbits or anything stupid. Harold moves at his own pace, like you said. He took the notebook out, and he has like his little station there. He's in his element. This is where he's the most confident and the most relaxed. So to me, Donna's definitely playing with him, even if she may have some interest emotionally, because it's hard to fake being interested in somebody all the time without paying some sort of emotional price. And the scene that's weird to me, because you described that about this, and I don't I'm probably making too much of it, but that's the theme to this episode to me, besides the strong finishes. There's some loose ends in here, and a lot of it has to do with Harold Smith, the agoraphobic orchid expert. He says that when she asks him, hey, tell me about yourself, he's like, well, hey, I grew up in Boston. But then he kind of like, it's like this thing passes over his eyes or was like that. He's like, well, I grew up in books. And so there's a weird thing to this. I like it. Right now, I think this is taking place of the detective stuff with Laura, because while they're making that they're looking to go after Laura's killer, right now, there's no detectiving going on at all because there's these other things in the way. So him collapsing, he's almost like the vampire treatment. We don't know why he's doing it, but well, obviously we're going to talk more about him shortly. But to your point, kind of going back and forth to the more serious scene with the judge, he's checking all the stuff against Leo. And the whole thing with Leo is because he's been shot, and he's been in limbo for Leo in limbo. He's been brain dead, but he shouldn't get charged. And so the guy you're talking about, the district attorney, is that he's saying that they should go through. It's for the town or whatever. And I think the judge, even though he had the great Valhalla speech and all that, when he takes a minute and has like a sidebar with Harry and Cooper, they get those goofy drinks like poured from. It's like, okay, he seemed like he didn't want to be a judge. He just wanted to be told what to do by them and trusted their opinion, which is very old school, and that's how it goes in trials. But the thing that came out of nowhere to me in this scene, because this just seems like it's moving forward and it's okay, is that, I mean, there's two things. The little thing is that, okay, Leo's not physically dead, so that's why he's going to be going home with Bobby and Shelley, and we're going to string that thing up for a while. But the judge is like, he says this big thing about Cooper, about keeping his eye on us woods, how they're mysterious and they're strange here in these parts. And so we know that Hawk has mentioned that a while ago. Hawk is getting a little bit more time here. I don't know if that's a thing, or we'll find out, but it's like the scene before with Harold when he says, yeah, hey, I grew up in Boston, but really I grew up in books. It seemed like that was the important thing, is that he grew up in books, that the weird stuff is something that we should be paying attention to, not facts like, oh, I grew up in Boston, because he could have just said, oh, I grew up in New York or Central Florida for that matter. It doesn't seem to matter, but those just seem to pop out at the screen for me. What about you?
Yeah, I actually, it does, because we barely hear it, because at that same moment, Harry's telling Shelley that basically Leo's coming home. The judge is going to rule that he's not able to stand trial. But my favorite part of this scene is actually right at the beginning, because the lawyer who's representing Leo, he says that the main reason why he can't stand trial is to look at these brain scans. Now, these are my brain scans, as you can see, a completely normal scan. The DA objects and says, I do not agree with the statement normal scan.
I would have concurred if I wanted to get technical, but go ahead.
He continues to show that Leo's is basically barely active in comparison to his own. But it was so funny. It was a small little jab that I did enjoy. And I absolutely do enjoy the judge in this episode. He was fine in the last episode too, but I think that it makes far more of a presence in this episode, even though he has less screen time. And you're absolutely right. Those woods, they are strange, and in little things like that, there seems to be more to look into.
Yeah, the drink that they had, I looked at it. It was in thin glasses. It looked like root beer with blue foam. I don't know how to explain it. And Cooper's looking at like, what the hell is this crap? It's not coffee. It's kind of stupid. So it's obviously just a little minor thing, insignificant, but whatever. It's just silly. I don't mind it. So sometimes these little small touches rather than the big goofy scene I prefer, but I like it when a show gets deep and dark. And yeah, you have to break it up sometimes, but we'll see what happens. Because the next scene itself is actually kind of goofy, and this is where unfortunately we get a mild amount of James screen time. But Nadine and Ed are getting back home. He's bringing her back home from the hospital. She doesn't quite recognize James, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you go to my school." So apparently the angle here is that with her, she thinks that she's back in high school again, and she goes to like get herself a drink, comes back, and she's holding the door of the fridge, and she's like, "Oh, it just came off," you know. So her superhuman strength seems to be
Still there.
ever present, you know, not just, you know, you could summon it for an instance of great strength. It just seems to be there or something. It's hard to explain. And she's a lot more smiling. She's acting more like, you know, 17, 18-year-old girl. But the important thing about this scene, I'm going to have to go back all the way to episode 1 when we first see Harry Truman at Laura's body. I commented then on Truman's jacket. Absolutely is a phenomenal piece of work. I mean, whoever the tailor was or whoever they sourced it from, fantastic. It's not dated at all. Beautiful, beautiful piece of work. But the one thing I've not commented on, and we hadn't seen Ed in a while here, man, his little butter leather cream colored jacket is so friggin' sweet. I mean, I want it. It's just so damn awesome. I mean, it's you know, in a show full of not remarkable visual things that, you know, scream affluence or anything like that might distract you from the story, which again I think is done well here. This jacket's popping. So anyway, spent way too much time talking about the importance of Ed's jacket versus Truman's cannot be understated, and that's your fashion Twin Peaks moment.
Actually, we do learn a little bit in this scene, not just about that, because James asks why Ed hasn't considered taking her to see Dr. Jacoby.
Right.
And Dr. Jacoby, we learn, is in Hawaii recovering. And we saw 2 episodes ago that he apparently his wife was in Hawaii. I can understand why he went back. But we go from this scene to Mr. Tajimura. He is in the lodge in Ben's office. And he says that he has an offer for Ben's Ghostwood project, which is basically why they burned down the mill. Things are adding up, and
yep,
they already did a deal with the Icelanders, I'm pretty sure. But Mr. Tajimura offers $5 million towards the project. And Ben, even though at first he was denying, he sees that and he has to take a moment. And this, I feel, is one of those moments. Everything's happening at the lodge.
Yes.
Because we see Hank. He's walking down the hall. And then I believe we see Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby's looks like he's scoping him out, trying to follow him.
Yeah, he goes in and he goes towards the right hall, and we don't see him again. But we see Dale walking down the hall with a little duck call. And he keeps blowing it. I'm sorry. But we could quickly go back to Mr. Tajimura. And it seems like Ben accepts Mr. Tajimura's offer for the Ghostwood project. And then he goes ahead and lets himself out. Ben quickly goes to this back door, and because Hank tried to step in but quickly closed it,
yeah,
he goes in and he says for him to basically wait there while he deals with Dale, who's waiting for him. Dale comes in, and Ben quickly gives the money to him. It's a quick exchange. Dale goes ahead after they go on the call. And then Ben goes back to Hank after the room is cleared. And he tells Hank to definitely get Audrey, but bring back the money as well if he can, because Cooper's not going to make it back. It's a lot of information to take in all at once as things are happening rather quickly. I think you're absolutely right. We did start off real slow and things picked up, but now we're just rolling in the story as it goes.
Yeah, a couple of small things too, details-wise, I noticed about this episode. It's like you say, we're getting a part of it here in the Great Northern Lodge. So when the actual episode here begins, you get this new shot that I don't recall seeing before the Great Northern Lodge. It's like a little pan and scan from left to right. So we get, and it's a daytime shot too, with trucks passing by or whatever. And then we see another one right before this scene happens, because that's your transition shot. And it's good because we know that they're at the Great Northern Lodge, but sometimes getting the occasional somewhat different view of it's kind of neat. And I had mentioned before that to show his character, Leland was talking to some of the ladies that are going to be in the Twin Peaks Tri-County Lumber beauty contest or whatever, and he's always looking at the people that are in his lodge, and they're always different people. They're the Swedes and they're these girls here. We know the Japanese are coming in. When Cooper's walking down, everybody's walking down this hallway, it's basically like one long take shot where the camera's fixed but everybody's kind of hiding, and in the background you see it looks like guys from India, at least by their head where it looks that way. And I thought, okay, that's kind of like these little running gags. I don't know that it'll be important, but there's a lot packed in here, whereas other plot lines just move really, really slow, and you're just watching them develop. And I think this is, about halfway through this episode where things start to pivot, because yes, we definitely get the impression that, Cooper's going out for the last time if we're up to Ben and Hank. But the one thing I wanted to ask you was that when we get the Tojimura guy sitting there going over everything, he's got the really, really, really bad mustache, right? And he's sitting there and it's like, oh, I have $5 million. We have it taken care of with our banks, ready to move. I'm looking at this person with the glasses and I'm going, it doesn't look real to me. I mean, I don't know if it's just, look, we do not have a lot of special effects in this episode or in this series. I'm not trying to knock it, but it just looks like it's a fake face. And I don't know if I'm just seeing that or if it's just this particular scene.
No,
I don't know if the person's supposed to be fake and we're supposed to know that as viewers. That's the only thing I'm trying to say. It looked weird to me.
Yeah, no, there's definitely something up. And even with how Mr. Tajimura speaks, it's with his thin rasp. It doesn't feel real. And nobody else obviously notices that, but it doesn't. It seems like it's completely fake.
Okay. So I'm wondering if that's Josie, but I don't know. It just makes me go, well, who would it be? Would it be somebody we've seen before? Josie has a very nice body. She's very elegant looking, but she definitely has, I don't know what you would call the haircut. You used to see it a little bit more back then in the 80s to early 90s, where it's not shaven, but it's extremely close cropped. I don't know. But anyway, it's thinking too much about it. Let's just watch and see what happens. Definitely the seeds that are planted. Because when I say that this episode pivots on the scene, it's because now we start to get into some really, really, really good stuff. So when I said, Maddie and the James gang, which means James, Maddie, and Donna are together and are trying to look for stuff for Laura, I thought that was pretty good. And even when it was girls only, like Maddie and Donna, when they were when they were kind of forming the team, when they were in the girls' bathroom at school, I was like, okay, I was really interested to see that take shape and see how it would move forward. And it really kind of hasn't. It just starts and stops. But here they've got this really beautifully hand-drawn floor plan. And floor plans are ridiculous. Nobody ever does them in real life. They totally break character for it, but I'm a mark for them. I love watching them go where you see somebody's finger move to stuff. Well, if you notice, it's right here, and the bookcase is here, but her diary is red, and the others all look the same, but there's a thingamajiggy on the side. I immediately start to pop, and I'm like, okay, I can't wait for them to go snooping. But they get this elaborate plan where they're going to have Maddie come in here and help her. It's not a quick scene. And then you get where Jean's got this little wrist contraction on his left arm, I believe it is, where he's talking to Blackie. And, Blackie wants to know what's going on and everything. And this is where we kind of find where we thought before Jean might be playing a couple different sides here too. But Blackie's sister, this younger woman, Nancy's there. You can see there's a little bit of jealousy between Blackie and Nancy. And we'll talk more about this here in a moment. But again, another quick scene with another quick one as they load up for the third and final act. It's where Andy's the guy that's the actual temp. Oh, yuck, yuck, yuck. He's got Post-its all over him, just like the tape that was all over him a few episodes earlier. Not funny. But when he calls, it's hard to hear, at least for me it was. But when I went back and I put on the English subtitles or whatever, it was well, actually no, I'm jumping ahead with Andy about the test results. This is what he's getting now, is the test results. He thought he had no sperm count. Now he's like super soldiers everywhere, so he's good to go. No.
I'm sorry. I have to break in because he does call to get his results, and the person on the other end says that the doctor said that before it was like he was 3 fishermen, but now he was a whole damn town. And so he promptly sits up and he says, "I'm a whole damn town." We see Harry walking through the back and looking at him, and he looks back at Harry. He's like, "I'm a whole damn town." Harry stares, gives a small smile, like, sure, buddy. And he just continues to walk to Coop.
Yeah, but like I say, these are quick transition scenes, but we get the meat and potatoes of the episode is this. Harry and Cooper together, and they have their own floor plan, this time of One-Eyed Jacks that they're looking around. So this, not only do I get one floor plan for Harold, we get one for One-Eyed Jack. So I'm flying high right now. It's like I've had a couple cups of coffee because this is just great. Hawk walks in, and it's like, oh, more Hawk. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you see Cooper just turning the floor plan over so Hawk doesn't see it. And then Truman basically says, "You can go home now. Good job." It's just an update on the one-armed man because that's a loose end where no one's seen him at the hotel he was staying at that they had located where he was at for a couple of days, but he had found there this drug that he had used, and it's a weird smell to it or whatever. But then they cut back to Andy. I was mixing both scenes in with Andy. Andy had called this number where Lucy's supposed to be at because she said she was staying like with relatives and whatnot, and it's for an abortion clinic. So I was trying not to use that word because of the way YouTube works and all that. But like I say, not to me a fun angle. It just is what it is, other than, Maddie at the diner getting some coffee to go, and James decides he's going to follow her. Maddie's acting like she never blinked eyes at him once. So what are your take on these quick scenes?
I just had to fill out that first scene. I feel like it was important to show just what kind of fool we're dealing with. But when it comes to the double,
that's all.
When we go to the Double R diner where Maddie's ordering coffee, James is being such a whiny little bitch about it. He's like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And Maddie tells him, "I can't really talk about it right now. I really gotta go." And she makes up an excuse. It's for Uncle Leland. He's just annoying. Thankfully, this is the only other time that we hear from him in this episode. But but it actually goes quickly from that to Maddie in the bushes with her large coffee, watching. This is a this scene is, I don't know how to exactly feel about it, but I'll just go into it.
That
It's
sounded
story
weird. I
time
don't
with Mr.
know how to
Smith.
feel about it. Either you feel something or you know something. It's not one or the other, right?
Yeah. Well, this is story time with Mr. Smith. And Donna tells Mr. Smith a story about going to the roadhouse one night in tight skirts with Laura. And
Her and Laura
they were with,
seduced those men or allowed
mhm,
themselves to be seduced. Oh yeah, this is
with
good.
yeah, with three men there, and full moon dancing by a stream, and jealousy from well, at least that's what I got from Donna whenever she talks about how Laura was dancing and how they were all focusing upon her. And it really just, I feel like, shows that maybe Donna wasn't quite so innocent as we had first just painted her with that brush early on in the series. But she definitely wasn't Laura, kissing two guys at once back on towards land. But as she's describing how Tim kissed her, you can see that Mr. Smith, he is getting enraptured. And as soon as she comes to the end, he says, that was beautiful. And Donna sits down again, and as she's holding the cigarette, ashes fall to the ground. And that's where that scene ends. It's certainly something.
I think it's her best scene so far in the entire series up to this point. Her and Laura were buddies. They've been together a long time. They've obviously bonded over boys and being together. We knew it seemed like they weren't running necessarily in the same circles right around when she died because of Laura's bad behavior, for lack of a better term. And here, of course, Harold's just chewing on the scenery because he's like, wow, this lady's really working me over. I'm really starting to feel it because, like I say, he's in his playground. He's relaxed. He's the man, but he's watching this, and woman's got him in his sights. Man, you can't say no. It's and you see the seduction continue. Like I say, they didn't just do it all immediately. This is built up over several episodes, several scenes. They don't rush when they're together, and that's really important. So I think that's done very well. And there's definitely an air of sexuality about it without it being trashy or whorish or any of those types of comments. To me, the vibe that I got from Harold that made it a little bit weird to continue whenever Harold's on, it's weird. He's like, so calm and patient. He's like, that was beautiful. Because he has that really soft spoken voice. That was beautiful, Donna. And I'm like, he's acting like he's, 2,000 years old and wrote the Bible, or something, like he's one of those kind of observers on the side. And it seems like it's very important for him to let her know that that's what he feels his role is in the universe. And just between some of the other stuff that's gone on, it's like, I don't know. Here he is alone. He's by himself because he's a young, decent-looking guy. We don't know why he's afraid of the house. It's just, damn it, he's more interesting because you don't know stuff about him rather than, the more you find out, the more you want to know. So I don't know if that'll matter, but obviously he's a central figure here in season 2. But the scene to me that starts to add up, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the Great Northern Lodge, we get a new tracking shot as a transition. We get the same one or one very similar to it a few scenes ago. Now, to your point, when Maddie's outside, she's got the coffee. You see her huddling in some trees. The wind's picking up. We talked about in the last episode, it looks like a storm was getting ready to be rolling through. She's out there. It's late at night. We get, those one-eyed, we get the scene where it's One-Eyed Jacks is what's next, actually. You get a similar scene kind of like that where you see, and this is kind of bad because the fighting in here is not really what should be emphasized, but you see Cooper and you see Truman. I felt their ensemble should have been complete turtlenecks here rather than these fake ones, but that's just me being nitpicky, and after Ed's jacket, I feel slighted that these weren't turtlenecks, but they creep up on this guy having a cigarette, and it's just a bad punch. Let's just say they take care of him. They enter One-Eyed Jack's, and they're looking around, and you see the ladies taking the older gentlemen to different places and stuff. But like I say, it's they're creeping around. They're over the border. They're not in their jurisdiction. They're doing this completely rogue, off the grid, as people would say. And it's not going to be hardcore action, but you definitely see where Jean has got that little wrist arm knife contraption thing with Blackie. And yeah, it's, we're going back and forth between things because we feel it building before we go back to Harold and Audrey.
So you're saying you didn't care for Secret Agent Dale? No. There is one little thing that I do want to point out about this scene before we go on with the seduction of Mr. Smith. And it's when Harry goes to knock out the one guy that's watching the back. Dale stays behind and he stays in position. And he hears hooting behind him. He looks back and there's this owl. And we get this close-up shot. And we see Dale for a moment, like as he sees the owl, his eyes widen a little bit as he's getting a little worried now because there's a lot of mentions of owls throughout this series that we've had so far. I wish I had gone ahead and marked them all down, but I can understand his concern. But that's quickly moving right along.
Well, hold on right there, because I wrote down the owls too, so I just thought it was in the next scene when we came back. But since you saw it here, I wanted to talk about that because everybody knows about coffee in the show, and it's just a thing. Everybody knows that they have pie. Owls are a thing. Trees are a thing. Obviously, the log lady we haven't seen too much of. So there's definitely, like I said, a lot of these themes that run through Twin Peaks. And what you just said, I think, hits the nail on the head. You said, I wish I could have went back and noted every time we saw the owl. Because when you're watching it, you don't realize that it's something at the time. And it's not like it's being forced on you every episode, they don't say coffee in every episode. So they're not overdoing it, force feeding it on you. But I agree with you. There's something here, like I say, with the trees, and it's picking up wind and they're outside. We talked about the traffic light as it's changing colors from like green to red. That's the thing, because it looks like it's always at the same intersection. So we get these constant reminders every few episodes, not for, I think, any particular reason necessarily. I mean, it doesn't seem that way, but as transition shots go, it just adds some flavor and character to the show. And like I say, the owl thing, it's a quick scene. It's maybe a second or two, but the owl's looking at him and tilts his head, and it looks like the owl's looking at you, the viewer. And there's just something, that whole communing with nature type feeling to it. I mean, Harold even is an orchid guy, so there's nothing more lush and feminine and sexy and temperamental and everything you want to call in the natural world in terms of flowers than an orchid, in my opinion. But that's just something I wanted to make a note on, because I wrote down here, owl hooting. Like you said, there was a lot of mentions of it. Doesn't mean anything. Hell if I know, but I like watching it.
Yeah. And speaking of orchids, Mr. Smith is telling Donna about the build of them, essentially, how the 3 leaves upon the side, and this one is like a landing platform for pollinating insects.
Totally a phallic thing. It's the double entendre of the show. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And she talks about how soft it is, and Mr. Smith, at that point, their hands meet. He takes it.
The quote-unquote accidental touch.
Yep. But then he takes a hand, gives it a kiss, then goes to her lips, just like the story. And then he pulls away and says that he needs a minute. And he goes out the room. And that is when Donna goes to the window with a flashlight and quickly gives the signal to Maddie, who is outside.
It's a great quick scene.
Mm-hmm.
The seduction works both ways. He says, really, it's all about controlling the humidity. You can't have it too moist. And I'm like, wow, people don't even realize just how sexual that sounds, because the guy's so soft-spoken, and he's a decent-looking guy, but he looks kind of young. He's a fit guy, and those two seem to be, you could see them as a couple the way they're doing it. They're both really nervous. They're both very excited. And what's most realistic at all about the scene, besides the double entendres, the entire episode, is the fact that he had to run off, I'm assuming, to go wee-wee or grab some prophylactics or whatever. But we'll find out if that happens here in a moment.
That's right, because we get straight back to Dale. You want to take this?
Dale and Cooper are still sneaking around there. They cut back to it, and they're going to OD Audrey, the killer, and they're all ready to do that. So again, the action is not something that's really, don't get pissed off if the action sucks, is all I'm saying, because it's a TV show. But Nancy, Jean's sister there, the younger one, the Blackie, was getting a little jealous of her and then got whacked. It seems like she's going to be in charge now. So Jean looks like he's the man overtaking everything. This is a big move, going to the big stakes room. She sees Cooper in a room or whatever, because she's like kind of coming to, she's semi-coherent or whatever like that, and it's like, can you take me to Audrey? And he kind of like puts her in the armbar, takes her in there. But I was a little surprised to see Blackie get it. There's a little bit of a creepy scene in here though with Jean, where Cooper and Truman have gotten separated, and Truman's kind of like holding him back, and he's got his gun out. He's looking, and he sees where Jean had killed Blackie, but Jean, after he stabs her, because he was made like he was kissing her, and he kneels down, gets on the ground, and just lays her out there. But some blood starts squirting out of her mouth, and some gets on his, and he looks like he licks it a little bit, and then looks up, and he looks like an animal, feral beast. Which is just, I thought that was kind of a creepy little scene here. It's not a big deal, but the neat thing is of course, they go to leave. Cooper's got Audrey over his shoulder. Truman's there. They hear the click of a gun. The guy makes him turn around because there's a bodyguard there. And then, of course, we get the thwack, and the guy falls over, because down the stairs comes Hawk saying, "You guys can't keep a secret." It's like, about damn time, Hawk. If Hawk, you had every right to be pissed, because now you could have been the sheriff of Twin Peaks, not had to bother with any of this nonsense if these guys had gotten whacked off over the line. But he's in his regular outfit too, jeans and like a little Indian top, whatever. But it's like, okay, we were getting a little bit more of Hawk this episode, not a ton of it. So that's what the show does smartly. It introduces a couple things that you might get a little bit later without forcing them down your throats. And then, of course, when they go to leave, it gets really not confusing, but everything's happening so quick. You see where Hank is out there, and he's talking to Ben on the phone about what's been going on, because he heard a gunshot, whatever. But then Jean, who was looking for him, came outside, and of course he missed Cooper, it looks like, and they took off. It's at night, the wind's blowing really big. He takes the knife that he's got, and he holds it up to Hank's thing, takes out his ID, and he's like, "Who do we have here?" But of course he had stolen that idea from the guy in the shop last episode too, so he thinks he's that guy. Of course, if you pause and you look at it, it says like 6'1", 325, because the guy was a big dude, so obviously Hank's not no 325. Hank's a strapping 190 maybe. But that's the big action thing until we go back to Harold's room. So what's your take on all that?
Well, I'm a little surprised, because I actually thought that the action's not great, but how it's portrayed is absolutely wonderful. Because Dale gets Blackie's sister and makes her take him to Audrey. We see her strung up on the bed, and Blackie's sister's trying to say, "Oh, they make us do it. It wasn't by choice." And at the same time, while he's trying to stir Audrey, we see Blackie get a knife. But Dale also sees, because there's a mirror right there showing her.
Yeah.
So
a lot of vampire scenes in this episode to me. That's one of them.
Yeah,
The licking the blood, the Harold falling out of the door.
Mhm.
Yeah, the whole thing, it just reeks of vampire movie.
But it was. I thought it was pretty cool, and Hawk does get to play a big hero there. But moving right along to the last scene of the episode, Donna is trying to basically point to Maddie through the window of the orchid room and say where the knob is. And in that moment, the guy returns, and he doesn't notice at first. And Donna's trying to quickly distract him, but Maddie finally gets the notch, and it falls back. And the guy can't help but notice the sound. He turns and sees Maddie there, and Donna knows that he noticed, and he quickly said, he's like, "Is that what all this was?" And he picks up a hand rake.
Yeah, boy.
And Donna is trying to rush to Maddie and get her out, but he comes in through the other way, and he has the hand rake and basically blocks their path. They're huddled up together, and he says, "Do you want to know what the ultimate secret is? If secrets is all you want, the ultimate secret is knowing who killed you." As he scrapes the hand rake across his own cheek.
This is awesome. This is so awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. It's a little hand rake for gardening, and it's apropos for the scene. And he's got this really maniacal look on his face too, and he's not hysterical like you think he's going to hurt them. That's the thing about this guy Harold, is we know he's a whack job. We know it seems like she's involved in relationships that don't go anywhere with unavailable men, I guess. So when she had said earlier in the episode, when Maddie asked her if she liked this guy, she went, "Yeah, I do." And it seemed real. So, but above all things, she's got to get that diary. So we don't know why he walked away. I'm kind of half joking when I say, well, maybe he went to go urinate or grab some condoms or prepare for that. He's not old enough to go get a blue pill or anything like that. It was certainly nothing like that back in those days. And she's young and he's young. So I don't know. I'm not going to lose sleep thinking about it. But of course, it serves the purpose for writing wise, why to get Maddie to come in. But I just love this little scene because he's not. It's a shot of just his face, but it's an angled shot, so it's a little off. And like I say, the effects are not special because there's a tiny bit of blood you can clearly see on his cheek as he's talking to him, and you can actually see it on the three prongs of this little small hand rake as he just scrapes it over his cheek. But you know what? Like I say, you're supposed to go out with a bang. They did that in this episode. Lots of nature references, redundancies coming up. I love that with the show. I don't want to see everything about a town or a setting in the first episode, but I do like an overview. I do like how in a sheriff's studio we've seen so far through these episodes that we get kind of sort of almost one of those stupid little quick mini maps of what the town's supposed to be. You know, one or two geographical features, you know, a couple roads, some maybe historical places, and that's it. It allows your brain to fill in the gaps. And so to me, I feel like Twin Peaks isn't necessarily the biggest character, but it felt like in this episode, more than the past several episodes we've seen, that the town itself has become a bit more prominent, just because, like I say, because of some different shots of the Great Northern Lodge and spending time with somebody that's supposed to be on the outskirts of Twin Peaks here with this Harold guy, which is in a new season. So I think this show does a very good job of fitting those things in like that. It's not overdoing it. It's not getting all your shit in one scene, which is the right way to do it. You draw it out as much as possible. But like I said, the way this show started, I really wasn't that crazy about this episode, but boy, did it pivot. And when it did, it pivoted hard, and it really left me wanting to go see the next episode too, because not all these episodes are going to be great, I would say. I've enjoyed them all a lot. There's been a couple that have been like, it's okay, I guess, and it got me through. But it doesn't feel like those first 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes at all. It feels like something so much bigger. People can say, well, it's watered down because it's television now. I can understand that. We're still not even halfway through the season, but definitely the seeds are planted for us to go in a lot of different ways here with these characters. Overall, enjoyed it. Looking forward to next week. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. I want to know what happened right after, but it's just you gotta wait. And you know what? When people were watching this live, I cannot imagine how that must have been, because having to wait every week is killer. And that killer, no, pun not intended.
Well, but the thing too is remember, at 22 minutes roughly out of every 30 are commercials, or the actual thing. You have like the 8-minute commercials or so. So a lot of these quick breaks that I've been complaining about is when they would fit in a commercial, you'd come back from the commercial and you would transition into a different scene. So I understand the way they would edit it and those things too. But the point you made about watching this weekly, which is the way we're choosing to review it, really allows you to kind of dive deep into it and say things like, well, we haven't seen a log lady. When are we going to see her? Or we haven't seen Norma in a while. Where the hell's she been? Or are we going to see this guy again? Or
is Catherine dead?
Right. Catherine hasn't even shown up at all this season. We're what, 5 episodes in? I think there was a comment actually made to Cooper in this episode by the judge saying, how long have you been to Twin Peaks? It says 12 days, sir. And then what are we, 12 episodes in now? So it looks like almost every episode's roughly a day. I don't know if that's true or intentional, but it seems to be that. And so you can get a lot of this out as long as you're talking about it, thinking about it, rather than just being brain dead and watching stuff. And again, the action's not what the show exists for, and so they had to have a little bit in there because of their little ops campaign they had there too, minus the turtlenecks. But yeah, very fashionista type episode. Good stuff. Any final thoughts for you?
No, it's just another solid week here in Twin Peaks, and I'm glad to be on this ride.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Twin Peaks Season 2, Episode 5. Harold's the man. We got great jackets in here, some great outdoor nature shots too. Check this one out. We'll see you next week. For Professor Pixel, myself, everybody involved here at the Xtreme Movie Show, have a good night. And as always, stay extreme.